It's coming? Yes, we can.
Okay. Let's see. Yes, we can do it that way. So, Anna, if you want to get started.
Yes. Okay. So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, right? My name is Ana Luisa Freitas, and I'm here with one partner at this moment, Julie. Julie Wolaskik is right there, right? You can see her. Our other partner, is probably coming in at any moment, maybe having technical problems. So I come from the south of Brazil, Federal University of Health Sciences of Porto Alegre, yeah. And it's our pleasure to be here sharing this presentation with you today. So Julie, can you
Yes.
Slide, please. Okay, so this is called a roadmap to higher education through interdisciplinary online collaboration, and it's about a partnership between a Belgian and a Brazilian university. So we are sharing the design of a virtual mobility program with you. The next one, please. Okay, no, I guess you skipped one. No?
No, I think that's, yeah.
Okay, well, thank you. Well, so this is the way we're going through this. We're going to start with our goals, and then we're going to contextualize our project a little bit. We are moving on to some questions, and then we are going to show you our roadmap per se, and then we are wrapping up, right? Thank you, Julie. Okay, thank you so much. So what you have there, the Sustainable Development Goal 4, Target 4.7 of the United Nations is at the core of this project, you know. So ensuring that by 2030, all learners acquire the knowledge and skills needed to promote sustainable development, including, through education for sustainable development and sustainable lifestyles, including, among others, human rights, gender equality, promotion of a culture of peace and nonviolence, global citizenship, and appreciation of cultural diversity and of culture's contribution to sustainable development. So they represent a cornerstone to the roadmap that we wish to share with you today. So let's move on. So to contextualize how this project was born, so I'm going to call Julie. So Julie, you take over now.
Thank you, Anna. So just to give you a bit of a context, it got started when the Center for Modern Languages at the University of Mons in Belgium organized a symposium pretty similar to the one we are attending now, but more specifically on ICLHE, which is integrating content and language in higher education. And so precisely because of the pandemic, or rather, thanks to the pandemic in our case, I would say, we were able to actually reach out to a wider audience. And so Anna in Brazil was able to attend the symposium because precisely it was fully organized online, and it took place in October 2020. And because we organized like a series of different activities where people could actually interact with each other, we got to know each other. We realized that we had many things and many concerns to share. And the idea came up to actually bring together our communities and to start working together precisely in terms of internationalization as a force for global social change. So that's how it got started. And then UFSPA organized a symposium. I don't know if Bernardo is there in the background, so he can join. Otherwise, Anna, would you like to say a few words about that symposium?
Yeah, so we had a symposium on internationalization, and so we are a small community in the south of Brazil. So it was a great opportunity to introduce our project, because we had teachers from UMONS. We had like Julie and different teachers who had already been part of this CLIO experience, like integrating content and language in higher education, and we could share experiences, we could share expectancies, and this is where the idea to this project came to be, right? Our communities decided that it would be a great opportunities for us to like unite and well, gather our students and offer an opportunity for them like to learn together, right? And to, I don't know, exchange cultural views and all the rich input that a virtual exchange program represents.
So maybe I can jump in. So we had like a few basic questions on which we started working together. So one of them was how to integrate and foster the SDGs, so the Sustainable Development Goals in higher education, and interdisciplinarity, sorry, was one of the guiding principles that we came up with. We also had like a question, and this is typically a question that I asked yesterday, actually, as part of the synthesis meeting. What is an international student in our settings? How we define an international student, and what are the different interpretations? And this is potentially related to interculturality and discourse and language. Another question was how to promote sustainable international online communities of learning and teaching in the contexts at hand. And this is obviously related to the question of internationalization, because our teachers, well, teaching is pretty much, I mean, in my context, is pretty much like an individualistic task. And so we thought that we would like to encourage teachers, but also students, to take part in online communities of learning and teaching to internationalize the curricula together. And last but not least, what is the role of English as a medium of instruction in communities rapprochement? So this is one of the main questions we have, because, well, we are at UMONS. UMONS is a French-speaking Belgian university. I mean, the language of instruction is Portuguese, Brazilian, yes, Brazilian Portuguese. So the lingua franca that we would quite spontaneously use would be English. But what does it mean to use English in a multicultural and multilingual, precisely communities, virtual communities? So there are a series of questions that we tried to put together, and this basically resulted in drawing some sort of a roadmap, which is characterized by signposts or guiding themes. So the first one is towards higher education for sustainability, again related to the SDGs, and how can we better integrate them in the formal and perhaps equally importantly in the informal curricula. Signpost 2, directly related to internationalization, and more specifically, how can we make the internationalization process more balanced and horizontal? Because as we know, this is absolutely not the case nowadays, and we think that we need to lead a more healthy and open debate on what balanced and horizontal internationalization means. And this signpost 3 stems from the previous one, which is interculturality. So how can interculturality make teaching and learning communities more globally aware and engaged? So basically, what does it mean? What does cultural identity mean? What does intercultural competence means? And how is it interpreted in all communities? Maybe, Anna, you can go on with signpost 4.
Thank you, Julie. So as Julie said, in this project, language represents a communicative resource that enables social interaction between our two academic communities that share a different distinctive and official languages such as French and Portuguese. So adopting English as a medium of education implies new opportunities for interactional participation for our communities in their process of becoming bilingual and literate for academic purposes. So for that sake, English represents a means for international communication and a way to promote an increase in social practices as well, right? Let's move on, Julie. Thank you. Well, understanding and recognizing the complementarity and the importance of multi, inter, and transdisciplinarity can help students be better prepared for the global challenges that lie ahead, as it leads to the development of whole system thinking strategies too. So we support the understanding that way people can make an active and meaningful contribution to society. So this signpost aims to support innovative teaching activities in which bridges are built across different disciplines and special focus is put on transdisciplinary discourse in language use. Okay. Thank you. The next one, active methodologies. Okay, so values such as creativity, collaboration, epistemological humility and vulnerability, also care and empathy need to gain more space in the academic teaching setting. So for that sake, we acknowledge the adoption of active methodologies that refer to pedagogies that place students as leading actors in their learning. And we favor critical thinking and a constructivist perspective on learning. Thank you. Let's move on. Yes. So international education exchanges are at the heart of internationalization because they promote an internationalized curriculum. So, and are favorable to intercultural practices. So we perceive virtual joint learning opportunities as a valuable chance to bring our communities together rather than a few individual participants compared to physical mobility. So as such, we identify a significant potential for gains in it, especially in reducing intergroup hostility, enhancing multiliteracies, fostering global engagement, and promoting critical digital thinking skills, among other aspects. Okay.
So this is briefly an overview. We're just reaching the conclusion here. So with the 7 guiding themes of our roadmap, which are sustainability, internationalization, language and discourse, distance learning, interdisciplinarity, active methodologies, and distance learning. I think this doesn't need to be repeated twice here. And we've got some questions for you, and maybe we can have an open discussion about this together. So can you help us foresee the main challenges to reach some common grounds? How
Julie?
to build compromise? Yes?
I believe
Yes?
Bernardo is with us now.
Ah, great. Bernardo, would you like to jump in?
Bernardo?
Well, maybe we can just finish it, and maybe Bernardo can join the discussion afterwards. So we've got some questions. How can you help us foresee the main challenges to reach some common grounds? How to build compromise to achieve the intended outcomes, and stakeholders' motivations and concerns. So here are the references that we've been using to build the roadmap we've been talking about, and we would like to thank you for your attention.
Sorry for all the technical problems.
Hello everyone, I'm a volunteer in the symposium. My name is Emily Espinosa, and I came here a little bit late because I was assigned to another group, but that group got cancelled and they told me to come here and help you guys. So the question and answer section will be available after all the presentations. So thank you, Julie, Ana Luisa, and Bernardo. So I think right now we have the presentation by Karen and Serena from York University. Excellent.
That's right.
So
Hello,
yeah,
everybody.
you guys have 15 minutes, and we can go until 1:30 something.
Okay, great. I'm just going to share my screen. Thank you so much. Now, what are you looking at right now?
Your desktop.
You're seeing my desktop. Okay,
We
let's
saw
try.
it for a moment, though. We saw your tab with the Google slide.
Did you? Okay. Can you see it now?
No, doesn't look like a screen shared now.
Okay, let's, sorry.
Oh, it's all good.
Let's try it again. How's that?
Yes.
You can see it. Great. Thank you. And you can see my full screen?
Yes. Perfect.
Excellent.
Yes.
Amazing. Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Karen Devenish Metzota. I'm a French as a second language teacher with the Toronto District School Board here in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. I'm also a course director with a program that prepares French as a second language elementary and secondary teachers at York University.
And I am Serena Quintal. I am a core French teacher, which core French is a term we use here in Ontario, Canada, where it's teaching the basics of French. I'm an elementary school teacher where I teach grades 4 to 8. And at the same time, I'm doing my master's degree at the University of Toronto in Language and Literacies Education. And Karen has been my incredible professor during my teacher education days, which my goodness, Karen, time has flown, but now it's to be doing research with Karen.
So our presentation is called Developing Intercultural Understanding and Awareness Among French as a Second Language. So FSL will use this quite often. That's what we call in Ontario French as a Second Language. The programs are primarily Anglophone students, but non-Francophone students will learn French in schools. So among French as a Second Language students through WebPals.
And so in Ontario, Canada, we have a curriculum for teaching French as a second language. And our curriculum focuses on 4 strands: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And within each of those strands, we have connections to intercultural understanding and awareness. So a little example of that would be when students are listening to audio texts, are they able to make connections to other cultures? When they're reading texts, are they able to write various texts in connection to culture? And so Karen and I were wondering, how could we bring the idea of culture and intercultural awareness and understanding to life through our curriculum? And last spring of 2020, we received a research grant through the Canadian Association for Second Language Teachers. And with this grant, we coordinated a WebPal program, which was simply a virtual exchange to connect students in Ontario who are learning French as a second language in school with students in Quebec, a province right next to us, where students are learning English as a second language. So both groups of students had very different target languages. One group is learning French, one group is learning English. So we wanted to use our grant to find ways of connecting them together virtually through the pandemic to support their language learning journey and their development in intercultural awareness and understanding. And this was in collaboration with a Canadian organization called Canadian Parents for French.
So as Serena said, we had students in the summertime who were at home because for the most part, our summer camps were canceled in summer 2020 here in Ontario. And many of those non-Francophone students, so Anglophone students, were at home during those months. And their parents were looking for ways for their children to continue to speak French. And in Quebec, with the majority French province, they had actually been given a permission from their minister to conduct small camps that the English as a second language students attended in Quebec. So our students were at home here in Ontario, and the Francophone students in Quebec were actually at a camp. So what we had done is we were following the intercultural awareness and competence of our own students when they would get online and speak to the Quebecois students at the camp. And we used semi-structured interviews, and also we had students write reflections that looked a bit like journals to examine their interpretation of culture, particularly culture that was lived by their Francophone counterparts in Quebec and how they connected those lived experiences, their own lived experiences, with their peers in Quebec. So we looked at the Common European framework of reference, and particularly the resources that spoke to intercultural competence. So we used Birham's model of intercultural competence that you can see here on the screen, that was developed in '97, to sort of follow. We understood that intercultural competence is an essential part of the language portfolio, the student identity, through the development of their language experiences of all the languages that we speak. So looking at how interculturalism was explored through the Common European Framework, some suggestions that were made by Michael Birham and colleagues was to use journaling as a way to have students document how their intercultural competence and awareness is developing. So we had the students, like I said, document and reflect, and we asked them particular questions to provoke these reflections. So before they started the experience, we asked them questions around, what do you think of the Web Pals program? We asked them student questions about what do they think students would be like in Quebec, sort of getting at their and uncovering their assumptions while they were in their Web Pals groups. We sort of asked questions about, what did you think of the week? What have you learned new words? And after, we also asked questions about had they seen a change in their own sort of intercultural development as well? Had they seen a change in their own language proficiency as well?
And to continue with what Karen was discussing with regards to connecting with students, for our data collection, we met with the students 2 to 3 times a week. Our research was focusing on seeing the students as ethnographers, really learning from them and following their lead. And so our programs, just like the summer camps in Quebec, ran from Monday to Friday. So on Mondays, before the students in Ontario had a chance to connect with their Web Pals in Quebec, we would get an idea of, like as Karen had mentioned, what their assumptions are and how the week will go. What do they think the Web Pal program will be like? And then midweek on Wednesdays, we would touch base and focus on, what did you learn so far from this Web Pal experience? Were there any expressions or sentence structures or vocab words, for example, that they learned in context? And then on Fridays at the end of the week, we would touch base again and record their answers and take a look at their digital language portfolios. We were able to use Google Docs to help them keep track of the words and the experiences and the reflections that they made. And we were able to collect all of that data to get a deeper insight into how students, such young learners, are able to understand and internalize a virtual cultural exchange.
So particularly, we were interested in the aspects of Birham's intercultural communicative competence with regard to the savoir apprendre and savoir faire, what we thought the students already knew about the experience and the lives of target community students, what might be new and what they might learn. We also asked questions around the savoir comprendre and discovered that students were interpreting and comparing, and also our questions were around the savoir. So there's sort of that knowledge, what students learned about their partners, and through that learning, what they also learned about themselves. And we found that in this research, the students demonstrated significant potential in the benefits of this program and how it developed intercultural understanding and awareness. By the end of the week, they made use of all of Birham's intercultural communicative competences through the virtual interactions with the English as a second language as students in Quebec. So we saw savoir apprendre, savoir être, savoir être. Oh, can you still see my screen?
I don't anymore, Karen. I
have no idea why that happened. Let's try that again. Can you see it now?
Now we can, yes.
Oh, I don't know why that closed. Yeah, so we found that they made use of all of BIRM's intercultural competencies, and so it was a very fruitful experience. And so I'll just keep moving on.
Oh, thank you so much, Artie, for all the great questions we have in the chat. We'll touch base at the end of the third presentation when we can have our discussion. Now, when it comes to recommendations, Karen and I saw that this type of virtual exchange is something we have to continue. It was just so rich in learning from these young learners, elementary school students, and learning about how they are perceiving their development of intercultural awareness and understanding. And so we wanted to think about what were some obstacles that we had to jump over last spring and summer so that we can kind of iron that out and try it again this summer and hopefully share it with more teachers. Because we're always looking for ways to think beyond a textbook as opposed to teaching about culture through textbooks. How can we utilize the technology at our disposal to connect students with other language learners around the world? And so some things that we have to consider are how are we in the future grouping classes when it comes to age groups, grades, language groups, things to think about when it comes to if a class has 25 students, but then you're matching up with another class that only has 18. How do we make sure that everyone feels they have a connection with their web pal? Timings of meetings, of course, when we're thinking on a global scale, organizing times for the groups to get together with regards to time zones, but even between our two provinces where there isn't a time zone change, still it was sometimes a challenge to figure out when we're able to find mutually compatible times to meet. Technology constraints is another topic that came up where our students, as Karen had mentioned in Ontario, were learning from home, so they had their own devices, but our learners in Quebec at summer camp only had one device per classroom. And so we had to be creative with how we can get students talking with one another. At the same time, our students in Quebec, when they're in their classrooms, they had to maintain a certain distance from one another while having one screen. So we were creative in that sense. One idea that we had that worked out quite well was an airplane style, where we have the laptop at the front of the screen and students are sitting in twos, one behind the other. And so the two at the front closest to the screen are talking to their web pal. And then when the activity changes, those two students move on to the end of the line and everyone moves up forward. And so it's a bit of a kinesthetic activity. At the same time, it allows us to be creative within our technology constraints. And another topic that came up was the target language. And I think someone brought this up in the chat as well. When are we going to be speaking English? When are we going to be speaking French? Is it going to be the students in Ontario, for example, only speaking French so that they can practice their target language, and our friends in Quebec only speaking English to practice their target language, or are we going to switch? And we played around with different models where Mondays would all be in French, Tuesdays would all be in English. And then we would touch base with the kids to see from their perspective what models helped them learn the most. What model was more challenging, more confusing, was easier? Exactly, Julie. I see you're writing about translanguaging. And so the idea of translanguaging came up with elementary school students and yes, talking about what translanguaging means and how that could support us in our learning.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, we found open, what is the word I'm looking for? Open-ended discussions were the best types of activities for our kids to take part in. Whereas opposed to the teachers, us leading an activity, having something more open-ended that the kids could really take on, and the teachers and camp counselors are more sitting back and supporting them with technology if there's any hiccups, but really having the kids own the discussion and the activity.
I think one of the most beneficial revelations that we found that the kids spoke that they loved to be able to virtually help another child their age in language learning. So they're so used to in French as a second language programs being the one being helped by the teacher, and they love to be in the position to support a student who felt like them, but in a language that they felt proficient in. I think that was one of the most satisfying findings, and a real recommendation for teachers to go for it if they can do this kind of program. So we'd really like to thank Rosemary and Lindsay Sutherland at Canadian Parents for French in Ontario. We'd also like to thank Kristen Johnson, who is our French as a Second Language coordinator here with the Toronto District School Board, who facilitated us to be able to launch the web program and offer this to students in Toronto. And finally, a big shout out for Guylaine Chavanel from Chavanel Service Conseil in Quebec, who was the person who put on the English as a Second Language camp in Quebec. So we're happy to send you our references. We had to write, of course, a formal report to the Canadian Association of Second Language Teachers who had funded this research. And so we have pretty fulsome references. And if you'd like them, you can always contact Serena and I, and here's our contact information. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for all of your questions. I'll take note of them and we can touch base during the discussion section.
Thank you, Karen and Serena. Now it's time for our third presentation. So welcome, Monica and Tulika from Concordia University. I'm not sure if we're going to have time for the question and answer section. So feel free to expand a little bit on your presentation, and thank
you. One sec. Just give me a moment. Tulika and I are very new to this Teams, and we are very Zoom people, so I'm just finding it a little challenging to connect and share my window. Okay. Can you see the slide?
Not yet, Monica.
Not yet. Give me a sec. Okay, 1 minute. We practiced. We're promising you we practiced, but now okay, here I get it. the console just looked different. Can you see it now?
Yes. You just need to do one slide.
Yeah, I'm just going on that. That's it. Are we set? Okay. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for being here and being a part of our presentation. And I must say that the first two presentations were so enlightening. And so here we are with our presentation, and the topic that we've chosen is overcoming language barriers in online learning for international students. And maybe we could say that our focus is a little bit on the adult learners. And I would also like to say at this point that I have this wonderful opportunity to collaborate with my school friend, Tulika, who's joining us from Stanford. So Tulika, without much ado, would you like to just tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. So excited to be here. I feel like the voices are growing. Do you also hear feedback?
Yeah, I do.
That's strange. Okay.
It's better now, I think. So look, you could go ahead.
Okay. So yeah, as Monica said, it's been a pleasure to collaborate with her. I'm from Stanford University. I'm doing my PhD here in sustainable design and construction. So not really related to education, but somehow our paths have intersected because teaching and learning have been a really essential part of my professional experience working in the construction world and also as a theater person. And we're going to take you through the perspectives of a student as well as a teacher in the context of international students who are also working professionals. So going back to Julie's point of what defines an international student, I think we'll talk about it as we go through the presentation.
Monica, yeah. So a little bit about myself. I am currently pursuing my master's in education technology from Concordia. And before that, I do have about 10 years of experience in the online world. So this online learning and digital learning is something that I've been working in. And to be working and then get back into studying. I think it just kind of states that I'm just a lifelong learner, and this is just the right time to talk about distance education. So what do we want to focus on? And as Sulika just said, that this presentation of ours, it's an effort from our side that we will be able to present both the students and the teachers aspect. I myself being an international student, I feel I can add the challenges faced by an international student when taking online classes, while Sulika will be address the teacher's perspective through a case study. And we want to focus on both the variables, which is the online learning environment and the international students. So why do we really want to talk about language barriers? Like, isn't it an assumption that when an international student, participates in online learning, they are expected to take a language proficiency test? However, I mean, I've also gone through that process, but I can say from my own experience that at times this can increase the barriers. And how do you handle these language barriers? So during the next 10 to 15 minutes, we will first talk about a couple of challenges that the students face in the online world, the international students. Then Sulika will talk about a case study where she'll discuss a few strategies that can help to address these challenges. And finally, we look at the scope of further research in this direction. So this picture, I think all of us in this presentation today can relate to it. We've all been working like this for the past more than a year. But what is unique about this image that you see, I think this was taken somewhere past midnight, because for the past more than a year, I have taken my classes with the time zone difference of around 10.5 hours. So if I reflect back and see how did it impact my learning, trust me, I am a good sincere student, but despite that, I do remember facing lack of focus, sometimes not participating in the collaboration that was happening online. Time management was a big challenge for me. So, there are a lot of challenges that international students face, but the first one that I would like to highlight on is the time zone challenge. And I do understand, and a lot of the other presentations also, we did speak about this, but one of the ways that the online world has tried to handle the time zone challenge is through asynchronous learning, but it does not give the same experience that asynchronous learning does. So this does turn out to be a real challenge. The second challenge that really happens with an international student is that feeling of isolation. And we did touch upon this point in the other presentations also, that this could be because, there could be difficulty in adjusting to the new academic culture. There could be a problem where the student is not being able to communicate with the faculty. However, what we want to really focus in this presentation is on the linguistic challenges. And why do we want to do that? Because I have seen, this problem with my colleagues, that there is a feeling of anxiety, and there is also this case study that we read from Zhang and Kenny, and it did talk about students who were international students who were part of a master's program from a Canadian university. And strangely, they assumed that their colleagues with the North American experience were more knowledgeable. So the question is, how do you handle this challenge? And at this point, I would like to invite Sulika to present the case study and share some of the strategies that she's practiced along with her team in handling these kind of linguistic challenges.
Thanks, Monica. So yeah, even though I'm an international student, I'm still doing my PhD. I have been a teaching assistant for this course called Virtual Design and Construction since 2018. So the picture that you see here is from the course as it is being taught by my advisor, Professor Martin Fisher, to a group of professionals in Peru, Lima. So my research lab, the Center for Integrated Facility Engineering, at Stanford, has been conducting the certificate course in VDC. I'll use VDC just to call the course. That's the acronym, for the last few decades. And a growing interest in the topic worldwide has led to strategies such as translating the course in local languages and onboarding local mentors to deliver the course material. Can we go to the next slide, Monica?
Sure.
Thanks. So just to give an overview of this, this course, it has always been offered in a blended format. Parts of it have been taught in person. Monica, you'd need to click through. Thanks.
Sure.
There's like 3 components. There's an introductory week, there's a 6-month implementation phase of the course, and then an integration experience week. The boxes in yellow are the ones that are in person, that have always been in person, except for the pandemic year. And the box in green has always been virtual. So what were some of the challenges that we faced when the course started expanding to countries beyond the English-speaking countries? So right now we have programs running in Norway, Peru, Switzerland, and so the languages spoken are Norwegian, Spanish, German, and of course, the English-speaking countries as well. Monica, will you click through? Sorry,
yes,
sure. That. So what we did was we adopted 2 strategies as this course kept gaining popularity. The first one was manual translation of course material. I know it sounds time intensive, but we did it because in countries such as Norway, the business language is Norwegian, especially in our industry. Even though several people are fluent in English and understand English, yet we had to, bring in the business language. So we manually translated the material. And then the delivery of the course material. So far, the delivery mode of instruction had been English, which was primarily Professor Martin Fisher, whose picture you saw in the first slide. He's the world expert in VDC, along with some sub-lectures by people such as me or some other colleagues that we bank on. However, now we started thinking of, in 2018, we started taking the help of mentors from the country itself. So in fact, the use of mentors is sort of a blended strategy of translating and using additional people as mentors, because the mentors also helped with the translation. Then came the 6-month implementation phase, in which the monthly check-in, which used to happen with the lead instructor in English, started then happening with the mentors in the local language. And in the pandemic, we realized that these monthly check-ins were happening like in a very, not all at the same time, with mentor skills that might vary. People started requesting us for some deep dive sessions into topics that they needed more clarity on. So we started doing deep dive sessions, at which point the need for real-time translation arose. And we are still working through this. We haven't yet quite cracked it, because real-time translation is been a little bit been a challenge, but there are some softwares out there, some apps out there that we may be able to use. So what's happening in these deep dive sessions is that the instruction is happening in English by an expert, and the student is trying to understand it at their end, sitting wherever, Norway, Peru, Switzerland. So the thing that we saw was that while we were not able to provide real-time translation for the English instruction, we did start with subtitles. And the feedback that we got was that even the subtitling in English was really useful, because sometimes students are not able to catch the accent, the way it is spoken, even though they know the word. So they'll understand the meaning if it is written, but a slight accent difference here or there. Yeah, I just went offline for a while. But so that worked, and we're still working through it. And the last part, which is the integration experience where the whole program is wrapped up, that, again, we've been using the help of mentors who interpret the submissions that the students do in their local language. So as you've seen, that mentors and translation have really been key in taking this program forward.
Great. Wow. This brings us to that, what does research say about translation and about mentoring? And as Serena actually pointed out, I think this is the same thing that I would also like to talk about, that when I looked at the research on translation, one of the things that came through was translanguaging. But I did feel that it was only constrained to the applied linguistics, so that is something that can be explored. While for mentoring, there was a lot of research, and one of the things is e-mentoring, which most of us are aware of, like the computer-based communications in which the mentor and the mentee can contact with each other through the discussion boards, the chat rooms, and blogs. And interestingly, what it did highlight is that having the right mentor is very important. He should be having the right knowledge and skills, and also have the qualities to develop a relationship of trust and open communication with the mentees. Tulika, would you like to talk about the recommendation?
Yeah, so Monica, you touched upon a very important point about using mentors, because then you have to, like, we are noticing that one is the course design, and the second is now how to keep the mentors engaged and challenge them so that they really continue to impart or, teach the students in the way that they were being taught before we started using mentors for the program, right? So some of the recommendations that we jotted down based on our experience in this case study were exploring multilingual format for course material, as intense as it sounds, and it is right now, because we're doing everything manually. It is an intense activity. And given that our field is so specialized, we have often dealt with words such as, I'll just give an example. In English, there are 3 words, a target, an objective, and a metric. They all mean very different things, especially in the context of the course. But in Norwegian, there is just one word, mål, which is used for all 3. So how do you distinguish between these 3, given that they are so important for the course? And here is where the mentors have really helped us by explaining through examples in local language what could be the difference, how the students should be really thinking about these terms when reporting and when giving their submitting their submissions, and using it in practical life as well. And partnerships with mentors, coaches, supplementary instructors in the local language is really a key thing. So along with, as I said, designing the course slightly differently, we have added modules where the mentors also go through training, and then the mentors can raise, can ask for extra sessions for themselves, so that if there is a topic which is difficult to understand between the mentors themselves, then we need to arrive at a common consensus. Also, we started templatizing a lot. Like, how do you, as part of the program, the students are expected to submit monthly reports on the progress. But what are the common criteria for grading? What if one mentor, it's so subjective if, there are 10 mentors. Then we started templatizing the criteria, and just doing extra sessions, understanding each mentor's plus point, and giving them sort of the center stage to walk through certain course material, take the lead. It's been a lot of learning for us, and we feel that, there's so much to be improved upon anyway, but these are some basic recommendations we thought would be useful going forward. And we have been seeing the benefits already, that now with the engagement of mentors, with all the changes that we have done in the program, we are seeing a steady increase in the number of enrollments in the program. And one thing is, yes, the construction industry is moving forward. It has started adopting technology, which is really the crux of this program, this course that we run. But the other thing is that people are finding learning really useful. It started in 2009, the program, and up until 2017-18, there was a really gradual increase in people enrolling. But now we have constantly, we have 3 or 4 cohorts in different countries. It's been a steep increase. There's some limitations about this case study, of course, are that the students represent experienced professionals, These are not your high school students, kindergarten school students, or like the term or the definition that comes to mind when you say student is not really of a professional that you're thinking of. But as Monica and I, we are lifelong learners. We feel that, yeah, I mean, anybody can be a student, right? Even if you're in working in the industry, there are still like, opportunities for you to keep growing in terms of learning. And I have like, people do take classes in the continuing education department, and it is really key to keep yourself relevant in today's working environment. And also the other thing here, which was that this was a single cohort. So we have programs running in Norway, Peru, Switzerland, but one cohort is pretty homogeneous. We haven't mixed them yet. They do attend sessions together sometimes, but it's not like the core teaching. So that way it has been a limitation, I would say, for this particular topic. But still, there's been enough learning as well.
So thanks, Sulika. So as Sulika just said, we do see that there is a good scope for further research. And as I just indicated earlier, while doing a literature review, we did see that there is a lot of research on how mentoring can be used for online learning for international students, for students with cultural diversity. But again, when it comes to translation, it is just limited to a effective pedagogical tool for linguistic subjects. And we do strongly feel that there is a scope for research to identify the positive effect of translation in other subjects also, like the way Sulika said, in something which was nothing related to linguistics, they have been able to make a difference. And so to summarize, I think what we want to say through this picture is that this whole globalization and democratization of learning is there to happen for students. The age is not the barrier, but where people from different cultural diversity are going to be there, I think it's very imperative that we as people who are part of the education industry work on finding ways that we can help in this new learning environment and help our students to learn better. And so that brings us to the end of this presentation. Thank you so much. And once the Q&A session starts, please be free to ask us any questions. And these are our references that we used.
Thank you, Monica. So I see we have roughly 15 minutes for our Q&A section. So if it's good with you, I'll ask each group of presenters to pick one question from the chat. And you have 5 minutes per group to answer that question, if that's okay. So yeah, who wants to start? Talika or Serena?
I am reading this. Is it okay, Monica? What is so specific about the needs and expectations of a professional international student, in your opinion? Do you want me to take that, or did you want to take another one?
No, you please go ahead. I'm still trying to figure out where the chat is. I'm so terrible.
Okay, this is Julie's question. Thanks for asking that, Julie. So yeah, some very specific needs of professional international students are, given that they are working professionals, they cannot devote, 8 hours to study every day. Like scheduling has been a big challenge, and they are in different roles. So even though it's a fairly homogeneous cohort, people work in various capacities. They're all from the construction industry, but some are, general contractors, some are designers, some have kids. So it's like just scheduling this and coming together has been a big part. Whereas when you think about school, it's just a schedule that's handed over to us, right? We do follow it. And then also the sessions that we do, for the introductory week and the integration experience, we do full day sessions, morning to evening, but that's not always possible with professional students to take, the whole day off. So the in-between sessions, the deep dive sessions, we have to really be mindful of how many hours can they really devote, how many days. So we have to sometimes just design the course, design those sessions in such a way that we do screen time for 2 hours, but the rest you can do offline. And then there's time zone difference, so we divide up the responsibilities so that somebody or the other is always there to provide support when necessary, whether they're based in the United States or Latin America or Scandinavia. Someone should be there. So yeah, and also professional students, and I think I'm in that category as well, that I jump to the implication very soon. With students, there is time to explain the process, how you do this. This is how the literature says this. This could be the implication. Or with professional students, they may not care that much about what other researchers have done in the past. They're more interested in the implication. How is that going to affect my job? So yeah, just blending in the practical implication and the research so far in the field, and to express it quickly so that the professionals get it without the research language has been different. Interesting.
Thank you.
Was that?
Oh, sorry.
Did that answer your question? Feel free. I know we are running out of time, but please feel free to shoot me an email, and I can share more.
Thank you. So I don't know if Ana Luisa, Julie, or Bernardo would like to answer a question from the chat. You're on mute if you're trying to talk.
Well, I don't know if there are any questions.
I don't have a question.
So sorry, Anna, what you were saying?
I just said I don't think we got any.
No, exactly. So that's why. I mean, we can answer any questions you would like to ask anyway. So feel free to ask them.
Exactly.
Right.
For some reason, I cannot see the chat. It says Monica Shah no longer has access to the chat, so I have no idea why I can't see the chat. So if there are any other questions for our team, Tulika, and you want me to address, just read out the question.
I saw a question about IELTS and TOEFL that it was really interesting. Let me find it. What do you think about the IELTS and the TOEFL exams? It was posted in the chat.
Is that question for me? Okay.
I believe. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I think I can just answer that from the perspective of that. I did give an IELTS exam about 2 years back before I went for my master's. See, I think the way it happens is that I do understand that there is a need to set the mark for, that you have to have proficiency for a certain level. But where I think most of the international students face a challenge is not so much to do with the language, but it is because, we come with a different education system. So even if we've done our IELTS and TOEFL and we've scored good, the main challenge happens is where there's a certain type of writing that's required, where we get into the academic writing part of it. So even if the IELTS and TOEFL is enough, the real support that is really required once you get into your master's and all is to understand what is expected from a student in terms of the academic writing, and it is not that the international student somehow falls back, but as I just said, it is that you come from a different culture, you come from a different education system. So it might just be a very different thing. And that is where I feel that a lot of international students, the anxiety and the anxiousness and how to start comes there. So as much as the IELTS and TOEFL do the part of, being the criteria with the points to get into the graduation, and I do know that a lot of universities do have the academic writing support, but if that is something that could be built in for the international students as not as an option, that do you want to go and join the session, but as it's starting at the onset only, that is something that starts in, I think it helps with the anxiety and all that, because what I'm just trying to highlight is that most of the time it is not to do with not understanding the concept. It is just that you are studied for like 10, 12 years in a particular way. So that is something that I could speak as an international student that about IELTS and TOEFL, yes, maybe it's kind of required because it does help you to set the expectation, but I would say that's not enough. And I do not speak just for myself because maybe I am privileged enough to have had that kind of a thing, but I do see when you are in a culturally diverse class that the rest of them do face that challenge. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Monica. Karen, Serena, have you picked the question from the chat? I think we have enough time for a couple of questions.
There were a couple that Serena and I addressed. I think one of the interesting ones was about assessment of the students. And since the students were, there were 40 students, I think we should be specific. There were 40 students involved in the study. And they were between the ages of 8 and 12, 13, we would say. So we tried to provide for them a way to document their reflections and for us to follow their growth with regard to intercultural competence and awareness in ways that were cognitively appropriate for their age levels. So through conversations, through observations, through their own journaling, and if they couldn't scribe for themselves, a parent could help. There were some parents sitting in. And just in terms of assessment, that's one thing we played with because there were such young learners, and also because we had in our heads that this would be a program that we could see that could be embedded in a school. And those are the same kinds of activities that we use for students to assess student thinking. If you want to add to that, Serena.
Yes, I have a concrete example that we can play with to kind of get an idea, where when we talked about having open-ended discussions, on Monday, for example, we would talk about what did you do over the weekend? And I remember a student in Quebec, I'll type an answer. Karen and I took detailed notes of what they were saying in the chat and everything. So we have examples. A student wrote, I go to the plage. And so French is her first language, and she knew la plage is beach. I go to is the present tense. So she was having a hard time with the past, as opposed to the teachers or the camp counselors jumping in and recasting it and reformulating the correct answer for her. Instead, it was like another kid her age helping her out and saying, I go, oh, I went, you went to the beach. So they're recasting it. So now it's the kids playing around with different strategies to support one another. And that was just one example of how it was really like the s'entraide, they're helping one another. And having that virtual exchange provided that opportunity for them to do that. Julie, I have a question for you. In the chat, you had asked us about the CEFR and how that is being used, I think, in the context of perhaps Canada or Ontario. From my experience, I'm sure Karen has even more information on how the CEFR is being used among teacher candidates and teachers. I would say as an elementary school teacher, we're seeing it being talked about more and more, but I haven't seen it mainstream yet. I'm wondering, Julie, what your experiences are with the CEFR.
Well, thank you, Serena. Actually, the CEFA is just everywhere in Belgium, so it's widely used, and that's why I'm asking, because it's become practically. I mean, for assessment, it's practically used at different levels of education. I mean, more specifically in secondary schools and in higher education. But I've got my concerns, and that's why I was asking these questions about, you know, certified tests as well, because it's pretty much one type of language which is being assessed, and it doesn't really show the wide variety of different Englishes or different Frenches or which it seems to be is highly problematic as well, because we live in a world where, and I'm taking English as an example, where it's widely spoken by non-native speakers. I mean, nowadays, the large majority of people who speak English are not native speakers. So, and we still use, you know, the native norm to assess students' level of language. And regarding the CEFA, assessment methods, I have my doubts as well. I don't know what to do with it, really. It's
I'm happy to speak
yes.
to that.
yes,
Why
please.
there is very slow uptake in Ontario, because when you think about that, we are Toronto, one of the most multicultural, multilingual societies in the world. Of course, CFR, DELF testing, particularly using a colonial language and the variety of that one colonial language as the dominant and only one to acquire in order to be considered proficient is in direct contrast with the kind of pedagogical stance that we have, and understanding of identities, and multiple identities, the intersectionality that we have in Ontario education. So I would tell you, as a teacher educator, that is what is slowing down the movement of the CFR in French as a second language teaching. Having said that, there have been lots of revisioning of the benefits of having a way to assess in ways that are standardized for French as a second language. That is afoot, that's being done. But it also, that just that word standard is problematic, right? Because there are many varieties of French, not only in the world, but here in Canada. So which one do you use? What's the problem is, when we do DELF tests in Ontario, we tend to use French coming from France when we have our own versions of French that are learned here in Canada and then again in Ontario.
Yes. I think it's very interesting what you've just said, because I mean, the language which is quite popular, which is widely taught, I mean, in Belgium, in French-speaking, but also in Dutch-speaking universities, is basically English. And so we still teach English like the British norm or the North American norm, and North American, it's basically USA English. But what students come to see me and tell me, well, you know, Chinese people, when they speak English, I don't understand them, or Indian people, when they speak English, I don't understand them. And I'm just saying, well, they are not going to change the way they speak, because that's the way they speak the language. So the problem is they're not enough exposed to different varieties of English. We still, you know, pretty much teach like a British English and I mean, USA English, and that's it basically. Perhaps maybe Australian English, if we're lucky, but that's about it. And I think this is not highly representative of the diversity of you know, different Englishes. So that's why I was quite curious to know how it worked in Canada, because I'm not quite familiar, and I'm quite shocked to hear that French is still like the main dominant norm.
I would say it's a norm. What I would say is
Yes.
what I find problematic as a tester
Mhm.
in Delft is that we're using that French to measure the students' proficiency against. When we have our own Frenches here,
Yes.
it makes no sense to me.
Yes, exactly.
And what is problematic is that it's only reiterating sort of a dominant language. And silencing and devaluing all the others, which I would think we would be beyond that.
But food for thought. I mean, there's still a lot of work to do in that respect. That's for sure.
Yeah, prescriptive norm, exactly. A prescriptive norm, but it's more than a norm, it's a dominance. We see it as that.
So this is an interesting discussion, but unfortunately, we have to end the meeting because I have to join another group and stop the recording. So I just really want to thank you, all of you, and for your presentations, your time, and your great questions and answers. And yeah, that's it for today. Thank you very much. Gracias.
Thank you.